So I am going through some changes in my life. And so had a little burst of random creativity and decided I want to do a video on my theory of assholes. Um, and it's not a unified, all-encompassing theory of assholes, but it's basically, because I'm going to be moving here probably in the near future, and when you think about places, you wonder, oh man, are there going to be people there? Is it going to be a good? I hate this garbage corporate term, but is it going to be a good culture fit? Is it going to be a good culture fit? Are you going to fit with the culture? Am I going to find my people there? Am I going to feel happy and at home and so on? And my intention is to move to a big city. I grew up in big cities. I seem to feel most comfortable. I have this big thing of heavy cream that I froze. You can freeze heavy cream, but it will separate and become this weird chunky mass. Like big cities and the wilderness are kind of the two places where I find myself most at home. In wild places and big cities, and everything in between, I do tend to feel a little bit of discontent. So probably gonna move to LA or Portland, depending upon work. And I'm thinking about that. And even though very few people have said, why would you want to do that? I do always kind of have this imaginary critic. Oh, why would you want to live there? There's all this chaos and all these assholes and blah, blah, blah. By the way, people don't generally say assholes. They just say, they describe whatever kind of person they don't like there. And I'm just for shorthand saying assholes. For example, I used to live in Denver. And in Denver's near Boulder. And Boulder got a lot of shit. I'm a climber. And particularly from like the climbing community, the outdoor community, cyclists, climbers, runners. Boulder would get sometimes kind of shit on. And there's other critiques of Boulder. It's gotten incredibly expensive. But people would shit on Boulder. And the general kind of vague complaint about Boulder was that it was, a bunch of elitists or posers, which is sort of a weird contradiction of terms, but people who were like really good at something like rock climbing, but also kind of elitist, exclusionary, not fun to be around. And then I'm thinking about moving to LA. I've spent a bunch of time in LA. I love LA for various reasons. I would like to be an actor in my old age. And people shit on LA. Everyone's fake. Of course, people complain about being too expensive. And then there's a bunch of dumb, sort of vaguely thinned, thinly veiled, thank you. Vaguely veiled, thinly veiled, kind of racist, gross stuff that people say about it. But all the city stuff, I'm fine with all of the city stuff and the cost and everything. A side note about cost, like for me, living in a city, if you look, it's sort of, I think of it sort of the same way I think about food. And this is about, I think everyone makes this choice in their own way. I'm not making the argument that everyone should live in cities. I do not think that at all. I think you should live where you feel comfortable and fulfilled and are able to feel like you can survive well. But if you think about a common criticism of cities is how high the rent is. The rent is very high. But I am privileged in that I've chosen in many ways to be a single person without kids who doesn't need a lot of space. So when you look at like the average apartment is $25,000 to $3,000 a month for a one bedroom apartment, like that's for like those are generally like one bedroom, a kitchen, a bathroom, in a building that has like laundry and stuff, and it's like with a fair amount of space for what it is. Whereas I'm pretty comfortable. I will be fine if I find a 400 square foot studio, which I found some of those in the 1500 range. Um, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. And I 1,000% understand someone thinking that sounds horrible and they don't want to do that, and that's fine too. And there's lots of other criticism to make about why there isn't affordable housing. There's a whole discussion to have there, but I'm okay with that being the price of admission for me to live in a place where I feel um, sort of comfortable and fulfilled. But yeah. Oh, so my point there was sort of like food. Like if the only way you talked about food was like calories per dollar, and that was your most important thing, then what would make sense would be to buy, a 50-pound bag of rice and a bunch of canola oil, I guess, and some salt and some powdered milk or whey protein powder or something. My point is, you get what I'm saying here is like you could get all of your macronutrients. You could get like a, you know, World Health Organization starvation, don't die pallet of food for yourself um, for a relatively small amount of money and not die and receive all of your macronutrients and hopefully enough of your macronutrients to not die for some amount of time. You wouldn't feel very good. I would argue, probably wound up not being very healthy. But you get my point. Most people do not want to do that. And if I had a frugal living YouTube channel and that's what I recommended, some people would say, oh, the bulk rice and stuff, would think that's a great idea. But most people do not make the choice about food, like what is the like calories per dollar question. So they make other choices, like what they enjoy and what is convenient and what fits with their lifestyle and what they think is healthy for them. And similarly with housing, if your only concern is like square foot, like cost per square foot, then yeah, you could go buy a 5-bedroom, 3-bathroom house in the middle of a field in Iowa for, or I occasionally, to torture myself, I'll get on Zillow and look at these like all these houses that are like $60,000 that are pretty nice houses in the middle of nowhere, but I don't want to live there. And apparently no one else does. I mean, no, I'm not shitting on those places, but there is a reason. There's lots of fucked up reasons why property values are so high in cities. Without getting all lefty on you, I will spare you. But no matter who you are, you agree there's probably a problem there. The market is not solving that problem. Um, but yeah, it's more complicated than that. It's more complicated than calories, how many dollars per calorie, or how many dollars per square foot, right? So I traveled in a van for years. I love that. I'm great with small spaces. In fact, when I'm in the van, and I lived in a one bed, like a studio apartment in Eugene. Excuse me, I'm getting over something, and it was great. I knew absolutely where everything was. It was incredibly easy to clean. It was incredibly easy to keep organized. Right now, I have a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom condo with a garage and a storage unit, and the van. And it's just like, that's just it's chaos. It's a lot of space. It's a lot of stuff to keep track of, and I just don't need all that space. So I'm fine with the less space. And okay, I guess this will just be a draft, and let's put it on the internet. I'm trying to get better at. I need to just write a script. I'll just put this out as it is. Hopefully, there'll be a more coherent one. So that's sort of my spiel about space. And the other thing about space, when you think about square footage, and people just seem to think about it in those terms sometimes. I think it had a lot to do with cars and a lot to do with people just being uncomfortable around other people, which I totally understand. But a city has, and this is what I love about cities and why I love the wilderness, is it has this like third space, this other place to be. This, you have the theory being like you have your work and you have your job or school or the place you go every day. And then what's the other place you're going to go that isn't your home? And in New York, it's like out your front door, like that in the city, New York City. And in LA, it depends on where you live. And I'm looking to live in a neighborhood. There are a lot of I've walked a lot in it. It's always surprised me how much you can walk around LA. I've walked around LA a lot in neighborhoods that I didn't really think were like walkable per se. And I'm like, I mean, I like to walk and I enjoy walking long distances. And I hate walking next to crazy busy roads, and that's kind of what I expected. Like just be walking next like strip mall after strip mall, but it was you can certainly do that. You could do a tour of strip malls and sketchy roads, but there are definitely some walkable spaces, and that third space with parks and beyond shopping. It's shopping is what people talk about, but even just like just leaving your home and having a bunch of incidental interactions, especially with people who you might start to recognize, you might start to see as part of your neighborhood, and without even openly, deliberately, explicitly developing a relationship like, hello, my name is, how are you? Like getting to know them, you still, in a sense, get to know, you're like, oh, that's that person, that's that person. Oh, they come in and out of there. And this person's always here. And it's just like, I really love that. And that just, it's something about that is really grounding for me because I'm a very social person and I like having really like deep, intimate relationships. And I don't really love small talk, and I don't really love um like coordinating, having like in the city you can have all of your close friendships, and then you also get this other type of social satisfaction, I do, from just having these tiny micro interactions with total strangers that are really pleasant. um so okay, assholes, back to assholes. So what is an asshole? An asshole is just something that I remember being at Joe's bike shop when I was a child, or yeah, a teenager in Tallahassee, Florida. And there was Joe, who was this cool guy from the Bronx, and he knew I just moved from New York. And so we talked about New York all the time. And he was like this cool guy who looks like, gosh, who's the guy from, oh no, Aqua Team Hunger Force, who wears the white undershirt and who talks like this? Yeah, that guy. That's not a good impersonation. That guy. He sort of a little bit looked like a much handsomer version of that guy and a good guy. And then there was some people. I was really into punk rock music, and there was this guy who worked there who was into punk, and he gave me. He was working on my bike. He had just said, I shaved my legs at the time because I raced mountain bikes, and my one of my legs had this. My legs were like incredibly vascular and muscular, and I had this vein that kind of went blah, blah, like. And he's like, God, that vein on your leg is disgusting. You ride your bike too much. And this was a very fit guy, and he was just kind of fucking around with me, just kind of joking, but just like, there was a lot of like that sort of loving, sort of screwing around, And he said his theory of assholes was something, that an asshole is just something that puts out shit, a person that puts out shit. An asshole is a person who you generally don't want to be near. You generally don't want to put your face by an asshole. I mean, you may want to put your face by it, but like you don't want. This is not safe for children. I think I checked that little box. Like, you don't want dirty assholes non-consensually close to your face. That's just true. And so there's people who you kind of get that feeling from being around them. And my theory of assholes is that the distribution of assholes across civilization is, I'm not going to say perfectly equal, but doesn't vary as much as we think it does. And whether or not we decide that someone is an intolerable asshole to us is affected by a lot of other things. And in particular, we call people assholes. And I'm using that as a very broad term. We can put elitists in there, shallow Instagrammer, like influencers, whatever the thing from a different place is that people want to shit on and say, oh, everyone in LA is this, everyone in Boulder is that, everyone in Portland is whatever, is quite often it's a person who is like pretty good at something, or there's an element of resentment. So in Boulder, it's one thing if someone's just like kind of an asshole, you know, but if they're kind of an asshole and they also kind of casually climb 513 and run ultras and um, are, pretty good looking, and they just came back from installing solar panels in a Himalayan village for, you're just like, fuck you. It's just it compounds it. And for me, my personal interrogation of that is that's part of that is just like resentment. Um, and so that's what I noticed, because like an asshole. I was a travel nurse for many years. I worked in a bazillion different hospitals, and you will see, go to so you see a very broad section of the community. So you might see someone who's kind of an asshole, but at least by my knowing them, like there's nothing they're super good at. They're just kind of no disrespect. I think we're all remarkable potentially in our own ways. People are fascinating when you get to know them, but there's nothing immediately fascinating or remarkable about this person. So their assholeness kind of like flies under the radar. But when someone is like really good at something or excels in some domain or is like really good looking, and then they're also kind of an asshole, then we just kind of hate them and we decide that they're an elitist or they're whatever, they're whatever, they're whatever. And some of that too can be it can be resentment on our own end, or it can be insecurity because for whatever reason that person's not validating us and we want, or whatever. And I don't mean to project my own psychology on other people. I guess that's exactly what I'm doing, but that's sort of my theory, because the happier and healthier and more sort of integrated as a person I've become, the more sort of immune I feel to those kind of people. And especially in cities, it is, and I haven't lived in a city. I was a travel nurse and I spent up to like 9 months in a city, but I haven't truly lived full time in a city in forever. So I may redo this video in 2 years and be like, oh no, they're everywhere and I can't get away. I just don't feel like my ability to find people who I want to be around, who are fulfilling and who just aren't raging assholes. I think the way to, like, if you're doing nothing and just sort of sitting there and observing, then I think the assholes in the world are going to kind of pop out for you a little bit more. But if you have things that you're passionate about and you have a community of people that are loving and supporting, which you can foster, it's just, again, a thing I'm really fortunate to have and be able to do, then the assholes just kind of fly over your head. And yeah, so that's my theory. I'm gonna get ready to go climbing now, but that's my long rambling theory of assholes. Cheers.